days alone.
I don't stop to think about it.
This is Rogers TV.
And welcome back, everybody. Thank you so much. As I said before the break, this edition of Out of the Fog has a very future of theme attached, and I am joined by a familiar face, and actually all three are very familiar faces if you guys are on Twitter or pay attention to TV and media. We have Terry Hussey. He is the CEO of Vigilant Management, working in the construction industry. But Terry is very active on Twitter and has a lot to say about our province in a bunch of regards, and I'm very thankful to have him on this evening. As well, we have Craig Pollett from Municipalities, Newfoundland and Labrador. He works so heavily in so many ways to help make sure that all of our communities across the province are well represented and that the challenges and opportunities are well discussed and have received the exposure. Thank you so much for being on as well, Craig. And one and only Melissa Royle coming through, my Out of the Fog co-host buddy. She womans the Wednesday night show, but she's joining us as a panel because as a lawyer with Benson Buffett, Melissa is also a very popular voice out in the Twitter sphere and in media regarding her opinions about all things that happen with the province. Thank you all for being on the episode this evening.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Happy to be
Well,
here.
it's a pleasure. Yes, of course. So let me get this right on the go. We have two segments we're going to chat through. The theme is about the future of Newfoundland and Labrador post-pandemic times, unprecedented times. That should be a hashtag forevermore. Terry, I'll throw it to you. Based on your industry and your influence, there's a lot on your mind, I'm sure, as it pertains to the future of our province. What are your thoughts?
It's almost overwhelming to try in the last few weeks to try and wrap my head around just the implications of all this in Newfoundland and Labrador, and then broader to Atlantic Canada, and then broader to Canada, and then the globe. I love business. I love history. These are things that I just enjoy reading and learning about. And so seeing things happening throughout history, and then this event happens, and it's like, okay, wow, how do we even process this? Before this happened, Newfoundland and Labrador was already sort of on the brink. There had been a lot written and spoken about all of our fiscal and demographic issues. So we were already, let's just say, vulnerable. And then, of course, the entire world economy has been paused. There's a global war against this virus. We're in the midst of an epic struggle to try and save lives. And so that's what's happening now. But then once we get past this virus and a vaccine is developed, it's sort of like we have to go back to what we were doing before, but can it be the same? The economy has been stopped. Thousands of businesses are going to die. Millions are unemployed. So how do they get that going again across Canada? But then if you zoom into Newfoundland and Labrador, we have no bullets in the chamber to shoot at this thing. We have no money. We have nothing. There's nothing that the government of Newfoundland and Labrador can do to try and make this better from a provincial spending perspective. Everything that we have is going to have to be backstopped by the federal government. So that's where my head goes. Whatever we do is sort of like we've got two broken ankles and we've got to climb a mountain. And so we're going to need a lot of help from our friends. It's the first theme that I would think we're going to have to come up with, is that the only way that Newfoundland and Labrador can push forward is going to be with a lot of help. My hope is that this situation has made it so that we don't feel bad asking for the help, because without it, I don't know that there is any hope.
I'll dovetail off what you're saying with something I read just yesterday. I put it up on LinkedIn today. It's a quote: "There's always free cheese in the mousetrap." Have you guys heard that before?
Yeah.
Craig, when I say that out loud and based on what Terry just said, what are your thoughts?
My thoughts automatically go, because I'm a nerd, my thoughts go to systems. So, the money is going to be a massive issue. Terry's right. The province is in a difficult spot financially just from the get-go. The collapse of oil prices isn't making this any better. What's happening with COVID is making it even worse. And we're not the only province or territory in this country that's facing this situation right now. There are several. So it's going to be a test of the Confederation to see how we get through this. What systems can we put in place to make sure that all provinces can work their way through this at their own level, at their own speed. My thoughts go to things like how do we adapt our governance systems based on what's happening now? So what we're seeing across the province is all kinds of hundreds and hundreds of little changes, right? So you've got towns where up until now, most residents were paying their taxes with cash, envelopes of cash going in with, $1,000 or whatever it is, handing that over to a town clerk and paying their municipal taxes. That can't happen anymore. We've got councils with fairly elderly people on them who are now being forced to have their council meetings by Zoom conference, by conference calls of some sort. We put out a call a little over a week ago on helping towns get set up for conference calls. In a little over a week, we had 50 inquiries from municipalities that were not using it and now want to use it. We're seeing collaboration between municipalities, sharing staff, sharing equipment, stuff that they didn't really have to do before, but now, the back's against the wall and people are coming together to take care of one another. What I see is an opportunity to try to keep that momentum going, because, man, we need systems change here in this province like nobody's business. At the provincial level, how we do legislation, how we do healthcare, how we do education, all these things we've known for years have required major systems change. And what I'm hoping is that all these little small changes, all these little small adaptations we're making right now will open people's minds to the idea that maybe the big adaptations aren't so scary. So in our sector, I know things like regionalization and how do we make better decisions is, for me, it's going to be a big test of whether we come through this learning something or just coming through it.
Thank you so much. Melissa, necessity is the mother of invention, and in your service, which is so intimate and involves the trust of so many in so many industries, what are you seeing and what are you feeling?
It is, and I think law, maybe even more particularly in this jurisdiction, is still a very traditional industry in a lot of ways. People in especially kind of more modern industries are often surprised when we still require in-person signatures and in-person meetings and have to fax things or hand deliver things. I don't think that's going to really go away anytime soon, but in law, the past few weeks, I think there's been probably more change and more technological advancing in the past probably 3 weeks than in, my last 8 or 9 years of practice, 8 years plus articling. So I think, I'm with Craig that, I hope that some of these advances can actually stick around, assuming the proper security measures are put in place. So what I'm talking about is we can now email some types of documents to court. You can now witness some sorts of signatures under the certain right circumstances over video conferencing or FaceTime or things like that. A lot of things that certainly raise a lot of red flags for, risk adverse people like lawyers. But, in certain circumstances, they can be really, cost efficient, energy efficient, better for clients too. So yeah, I think that there's, especially in other jurisdictions, I think have gone even a little bit fast, and there's doing a lot more court appearances by video conferencing. And, all of those things I think can be looked at maybe as a way, a look into the future for sure. But, people get concerned, legal affairs are obviously very, can be very personal, can be very significant. And so none of these steps can be taken lightly. But, I think I'm with Craig that, in the legal sphere, as there is in the municipal sphere, that there is an opportunity here.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I do think that we are all very cognizant of the buzzword of risk as it applies to all of our vocations and society in general. We're all in the business of risk. And also to that tune, we're all needing to wake up to the fact that we're all in the business of innovation as well. Terry, when I say that to you, looking at your own day-to-day life, what does that mean to you?
Well, it's become kind of, you think about Newfoundland and Labrador and the realities of where we are, because of our geographic location, it's unlikely that we can be a manufacturing powerhouse, so to speak, because of the logistical costs of shipping something from here to other places.
No one ever told Joey Smallwood that.
No, that's the truth. But
maybe they should have, but
Newfoundlanders and Labradorians have always had quite a strong background in being resilient, having grit. You know, the kind of thing we planted ourselves on this godforsaken rock in the middle of the Atlantic and this coastline on the northeast of Canada that's quite difficult to live in, and we've sustained ourselves here for hundreds of years. And because of that, our culture has kind of got this we can figure it out attitude. Now, we've been pretty battered throughout our history. It's kind of I sometimes joke that suffering is like Newfoundland and Labrador's pastime. Like, we were born to suffer. We're quite good at it. Look at the weather, for example. But because of that, we're always quick to come up with an idea or a way to slap something together. Like, there's a way for us to do that. Let's hook that bucket up to that rake. And boom, next thing you know, you've got this solution. But when you apply it to more modern things like technology and innovation and coming up with new ideas and new systems, just as it applies to products and services and things we can bring to market, I really believe, I mean, honestly, it's why I'm here. I've got a company with 17 people. I'm 40 years old. I don't live somewhere else. I believe we have the potential here to be an economic powerhouse in the region, in Canada. We've got the talent, we've got the drive, we've got the resilience. It's just sometimes it's almost like we can't get anything other than our own success. And there's a little bit of a cultural thing where we don't want to have anybody be too successful, you know, and keep it, you know, don't get too egotistical here. But what we really need is a bunch of Babe Ruths hitting home runs out over, and so that we can just cheer them on. I want 55 Verafins. I think it's fantastic. I want $10 billion Newfoundland companies. I want them swinging their money around because they're so successful, because that's the future. I want little kids, boys and girls at school, to see these ultra successful Newfoundlanders and Labradorians and say, I can do that. You know, how many people saw Brad Gushu's team win at the Olympics and think, hey, maybe I could go to the Olympics? I mean, this stuff matters. They see somebody like Melissa on TV and they're like, I could do that. Like, this stuff matters. And so we just need to believe in ourselves a little bit more. And innovation, I think, is the key to it. It's not just technology. I mean, my business is construction, but I think of myself as an innovation company. So it spans all the industries. You can be a lawyer and be innovative. It really is the key to everything we do.
Thank you so much, Terry. I'll tell you what, guys, we're at our first break segment. We're going to have a little moment. Come right back. This is the future of Newfoundland and Labrador. Out of the Fog, right back after this break.
All right, girls.
Mom, you said it's played again.
Workplace injuries hurt the most at home.
Welcome back, everybody. An important edition of Out of the Fog this evening with three of these heavyweights, and we're talking about the future of Newfoundland and Labrador post-pandemic and beyond. And there was an interesting point we had talked about before the break, which is about innovation. So I want to bring it down to you, Craig, and have a conversation with you around what you're seeing in terms of how things are actually maybe getting done quicker on the watch of innovation on the governmental levels that be. Why don't you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so before I get to that, I want to make a quick little point. I want to follow up on something Terry left off on around business development, because I really think we're in a good place in terms of entrepreneurship and small business playing a big role in the recovery. We put a lot of emphasis on big businesses that can employ a lot of people. But in fact, when we have a crisis like this, I like the idea of having lots of medium-sized businesses that are growing, that are more flexible, more resilient, can adapt quicker, that sort of thing. And if you're as old as I am, or like a policy nerd like some of you guys might be, you might remember the Royal Commission on Employment and Unemployment by Dr. Doug House. where he basically laid out the plan for a strategy for developing entrepreneurship and small businesses in our province. And I think, it's old, but it's innovative, and it's still innovative. And it might be worth looking back on something like that for how do we pull ourselves out of this by seeding more entrepreneurship. And that's what innovation is all about. Innovation happens in, small is beautiful. Innovation happens in small firms because they have to. That's what's happening in municipal government. Municipal governments are innovating very quickly because they don't have the weight of a party system, for example, holding them down. They don't have a lot of bureaucracy. They're able to adapt quickly. But I'm not just seeing it at the municipal level. I'm really pleased to see barriers coming down between orders of government and within the provincial government, for example. Not as many people seem to be worried about what party they're with or what department they're with. There is as much as there can be in the Confederation building, there's a we're all in this together sort of vibe happening. And I think that's starting to happen across the province. It's sort of a primer, I think, for how we're going to have to govern and run things in the future. I don't think we can afford that kind of baggage dragging us down in the future. We're going to have to be nimble. We're going to have to be quick, lean, and resilient and focused, super focused on what needs to be done. So if we can, as I said at the beginning, if we can keep that momentum going, there might be some cause for optimism.
I'll ask you, Melissa, to take off of what Craig is saying, but I'm going to put a bone in it. I don't want to throw you a hard one, but are we capable, with so much union and so much bureaucracy and so much protective layer, are we capable of innovation and being nimble when it comes to the true wheels that need to get better at turning? What are your thoughts?
I think we are. There's definitely a lot of challenges. Just to mention what Craig just said about the parties working together, nothing warmed my political nerd heart so much as seeing the leaders come out and do a joint press conference and compliment each other and seem to work together. I mean, I think that that's exactly what we need, and I think that that made a lot of people gain respect for all of them, to be frank. But in terms of where Newfoundland goes from here, I mean, four of us could have been having this conversation months before the COVID-19 pandemic about what's the future of Newfoundland and Labrador and how are we going to get through this being, our economic and our fiscal situation. Certainly this, and then coupled with the, the crashing price of oil right now, is has the potential to decimate us. So, in some ways, the federal government or the Bank of Canada, by agreeing to back provincial bonds, has helped us, but it's helped us borrow more, right? So it's a bit of a band-aid, but the needs in this province are just so big. I know, just speaking from personal experience, watching so much news over this period, and seeing all the different vulnerable sectors of our society and how they're so affected by this. Certain services that are so important to people and to groups that aren't being able to be done because of the restrictions, or funding that hasn't come in through from donors for certain charities that provide just imperative services to people. It's really kind of opened my eyes to, how much is going on in our community to help people that's now in peril. And when we come back out of this, I'm concerned that where the money's going to come from to continue these, even when things come back to normal, people are going to have less money to donate to charities. Our tax base is going to be affected. And, I think that we've got really, really tough times ahead. And, I share in some optimism that this is a great time. It's a great opportunity to innovate and do things better. But it's not going to be easy. And like you say, we're also, we have a very big public service, and there's been some question about, why aren't there more widespread layoffs in the public sector in Newfoundland and Labrador when they've been the private sector has been certainly subject to them. But I don't think it's that easy. That's a big economic, force is the public sector in our province. And, simply cutting that or affecting that in any kind of a abrupt manner is dangerous too. So yeah, I don't have any answers, just more questions.
Totally, like the rest of us. I mean, Terry, working for two small businesses like ours, I grew up in a municipal household where my dad worked for the city his entire career. So I'm very evenly balanced on the pros and cons of being flippant about anything to do with small business versus more institutionalized union-based structures. What are your thoughts on this?
So, I mean, I really think Melissa is nailing the core theme here, which is there is no easy answer. And truthfully, I believe Newfoundland and Labrador's future, there's not a lot of outcomes here. There's really only two possible outcomes in my mind. One is we go back to doing things the same way we always did, and we are finished in 10 years. And in 2040, when Newfoundland and Labrador takes back the Upper Churchill, there's 300,000 people living in the province. It's a tourism province. That's it. That's all it is. Any industry here will have left, and that's one future. The other future is pulling on the things that Craig and Melissa are talking about, is that we realize, okay, wow, the time is now. We need to actually change everything about how we've govern ourselves, led our lives, our expectations about what's reasonable, how hard we need to work. And we turn the corner and we try and become on the more progressive end of what's necessary to govern a province in Canada versus always trailing the end and being the last to do things. That is going to require a complete shifting of cultural attitudes within business, politics, communities, charities. Everybody in this province from top to bottom is going to need to buy into, wow, we have got a tremendous labor ahead of us, but if we stick to it together and we care about each other and we try and be fair and reasonable and make it so that everybody has some sense of equality and fairness, then there's hope. But really, I don't see any middle ground, right? It's either going to go one way or the other. And some of the things that are happening in response to the pandemic makes me feel, as Melissa said, okay, wow, like maybe there's some hope. Because if we could just do this everywhere, we would find these middle ground solutions and it would be great. So that's what gives me some hope. But I have to agree with Melissa that the path to a hopeful future in Newfoundland and Labrador is pretty rocky.
Well, maybe the buzzword of attrition will, for the millionth time over the last year, come back to be in our benefit. Because whenever the subject comes about necessary changes we have to make in every corner of the province, all I hear is the silent whisper of attrition will take care of that.
Yeah.
Attrition.
When I hear the words attrition, I think, don't worry about the millennials. They'll be fine.
Yeah. Which is important. We're in the final couple of minutes, guys, of this cast. But Craig, I have to ask you, when it comes to aging populations, especially so many in the rural pockets, the need to innovate and to tech adapt is definitely one that may be met with some trepidation and some insecurities. I know the YMCA is offering a media mentors program to do its part to help get the older populations more up to date with how to use all the tools that we take advantage of every day. But how will analog adults rise to the challenge? What are your thoughts on this based on your work?
Well, what we're hearing is that they're asking their kids. You know, it's a very simple, you know, when VCRs first came on the scene, you asked your kid. When my dad first got a laptop, he calls me. That's what's happening. People are saying, the town tells me I got to pay my bills electronically. I don't know what I'm doing. Give me a call, run it, you know, walk me through it to see how it gets set up. I think that transition is going to happen. That transition's been happening for decades and decades and decades. That's not necessarily about COVID. But I do think, I want to come back to something Melissa mentioned and Terry, actually both. The future is not going to be cheap, right? If we want to do things better, I don't think anybody should assume that we're going to be saving a ton of money here. The fact is, in the municipal sector, in most of our sectors, we do things on the cheap already. That's why we're not making great decisions in a lot of cases, because we're not investing the money in the systems to make good decisions. So the future is not going to be cheaper than it is now. And people need to start wrapping their heads around the value of investing your tax dollars in a viable governing system, and a viable decision-making system. And it's going to be tough. There is absolutely no doubt about it. The key to me, though, is, yes, it's going to be tough. We've decided that. How are we going to react to tough? Are we going to run, or are we going to try to fix the systems so that we can get through the best way we can?
Yeah, I think if we can all just beam into Detroit downtown for a hot minute and walk through that space, only drive through it quickly with your windows rolled up, I think that we would all be a little bit more woke to the way we need to think to avoid getting to that place. And as I said at the top of the show, go ahead, say Craig?
The fact that it can happen. I've been to Detroit. I've been in those neighborhoods. I've seen the houses that are overgrown and abandoned and roofs caved in. I've seen whole neighborhoods that were abandoned. So let's not kid ourselves into thinking that without an investment in the public services that we have, that can't happen. It absolutely can happen.
Thank you so much, guys. This has been one of the quickest moving casts that I've done under this theme. You've all been so amazing. There will be obviously labels below your headshots once this show airs, so people can follow you and keep attuned to the amazing things that you do every day to help us lead everything forward. Melissa, Terry, and Craig, thank you so much for jumping on this cast this evening, and we'll all see each other soon in the future, I hope.
Definitely.
Thanks, Donnie.
Thanks a lot.
All right, guys, have a good evening. Until next time, everybody, this is Out of the Fog, and we will see you soon.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or connect with us on social media.
For my kind, there was one place we were never allowed to go. Your world.
What are you gonna do?
Show this world for what it really is.
The world's most famous Canadian, Grey Owl, just back from a triumphant British tour, is to be a reluctant guest at a gathering of First Nations.
Archie, you may not realize this, but right now you are the most famous Red Indian in the world. These are your people. You have to be there. Come on, Harry. Let's go.
Sure, I'm sure. His name is